All right, Scott, thanks again for being a guest on Wicked Smart Golf. Excited to have you back for part two today.
Absolutely. Definitely enjoyed the first one, and it was good seeing you in Orlando a couple weeks ago. So
Yeah, man,
perfect
that
timing.
was it was weird. Like I was almost 2 years. It was like a year and a half ago since you were first on the show, and so it's always fun to revisit. And like I said before we hit record, you were the number one downloaded episode. So I want to just say thank you, man, for just being a great guest and helping me grow the show, helping get Decade out to more and more people. It's had a massive impact on my game, and yeah, I'm excited for what we can get into today.
That's good to hear. I mean, it is weird because I certainly consider myself, I guess I'm not a newcomer to the scene anymore, but it is weird how consistently the podcast that I'm on tends to be one of that person's top downloads. And I think people they're just kind of sick of hearing about live and just the week to week nonsense of golf. And it's like, oh, this resonates more with how to play and score, which is what I hope we're all interested in. I mean, it is weird sometimes. And I get people that I feel like they're just being too abrasive, like, well, I don't care what I shoot. Like, well, no, yes, you do. Like, are you
I
an
can
alien? Like,
I
so
couldn't agree
weird.
more. My audience is definitely excited to try and play better. I get so many emails and DMs and, use this app or tried this program. So many people have tried Decade and joined Decade. So it's always fun when I do like mental golf coaching with students and I don't have to explain a lot of stuff because like I already went through Decade, already went through this and they get it. And like I said, when we were in Orlando, I mentioned to you when I was playing in several tournaments last year, every guy in my group knew Decade. And we were talking, oh, what's your target here? And it's just like, it's part of competition here in Arizona. We have a great tournament series and yeah, everybody loves Decade. And I feel like that's a good place to start. So like I mentioned, I did have a replay episode of our first one, but just kind of give a quick background in case anyone didn't get a chance to get the full listen on that, kind of what is Decade and who can use it to play better and think better throughout the round.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm actually the exact person I would look for to teach right now. The more that I understand what I teach, I played all the sports through high school and selected golf going into college. Well, I didn't select golf. I've eventually, even though I'm 6'1" and 220, I'm a pretty big guy. Eventually, you're not big enough for actual college sports, so went with golf. And then I actually transferred after my first year, and then I broke my ankle playing basketball with the D1 golf team. I played at Texas A&M. Shockingly, that didn't go very well. I lived with some guys on the basketball team, and so I really didn't even play much college golf. But then naturally turned professional out of school, which looking back at is comical.
So you didn't play any
Um,
college golf at all? You weren't like on the team or recruited in high school or?
I was not recruited anywhere. I mean, again, like I didn't play enough junior golf. I only played in one AJGA ever. I mean, I think that a college coach could look at me and be like, this guy doesn't shoots a million, but he doesn't have any tournament scores. But man, I see something there. I mean, again, that's probably why I turned pro. Is I just always like, I know I'm better than this. I just need more time. And to be perfectly honest, that's in looking back at my career professionally, that's the one thing that I do say is I graduated and wanted to be on tour the next year. And somebody needs to grab me like, hey, dude, you're not going to be on tour for like 4 years. You've got a lot of work to do. But if you put those 4 years of work in, you got a chance. So I graduated in 96, really started playing in 97. I mean, and I won twice on the Hooters Tour in 1998. So, I mean, I won 72 hole golf tournaments pretty quickly, but I was just all over the place with my results. And what I really needed to understand was, dude, you've just got 3 or 4 years worth of work. Don't even bother entering Q school. Save your money, get a little job, like be intelligent and just stick to what you're working on. So every year when I would miss at Q school, I would just throw everything I'd done that year in the garbage and be like, okay, I'd go to Walden Books and buy a notebook and every book in the golf section and just retool. And it's like, dude,
Just
you
yeah.
improved this year. You're on the right trajectory. You just need to keep doing the same thing. So I was always chasing my tail, which God, if I had access to YouTube, I would have been even worse these days because I would be trying a different swing key every single day. And it's so anyway, so I graduated, played professionally for 4 years, right around the time that I was really starting to figure it out. I would say I certainly had my most successful year in 2001. I played this Pro Tour Hawaii where they stole all of our money after three events. It was a 14 event series in Hawaii, or an 11 event series that you paid 14,000 up front for. The guy skated with all of our money after three events. They actually finally found him in like August, and then 9/11 happened, and all the FBI's resources were diverted to that. So then I missed my one at Q school, and I'm just like, I'm smoked, man. I can't do this anymore. And luckily for me, Texas was deregulating its electricity market in 2000, January 1st of 2002. I had some buddies that were starting electricity companies. So they were telling me, they're like, dude, with your background in golf, I've got finance and economics degrees. I grew up at a pretty nice club here in Dallas. They're like, you could sell a lot of electricity. And so the plan was I was just going to do that for like 6 months and then go back to golf in 2002. And it was just too easy. So I just kept doing that. So then I just worked 100-hour weeks for like 5 years. But in the interim, in that 5 years, started playing a lot of poker. And it's so interesting that, like, even with a strong math, logic, finance, econ background, I never thought of golf as a math game until playing a lot of poker and obviously studying a lot of poker. And what's actually really funny is I met Chris Como in an underground poker game in 2004 or 5, something like that. And so Como and I became best friends. And we literally didn't even talk about golf for like a year and a half. And then one day it comes up that he's a golf instructor. I'm like, dude, I play professional golf. Went out and got a golf lesson from him. And literally like 2005 or 6 was the first time I learned modern ball flight laws and everything from him. And so got to where I was playing some pretty good golf and wound up entering Q school as a 35-year-old amateur in 2008, made it through all 4 stages, and then tried to play part-time professional golf in 9, 10, and 11, which was about as bad of an idea as it sounds. But then in 2011 was when they first started releasing the strokes gained statistics to circle it back to golf and the point. And I was a contributor to this online poker forum called 2+2. And I wrote a thread in May or June of 2011 titled, "Is Drive for Show, Putt for Dough Really True?" And honestly, thank God I did, because so many people have been like, oh, you just took Mark Brody's work and whatever. And I'm like, well, dude, I've been working on this idea for years. Now, yes, it is all entirely based on Brody's data. But once you've got, the Mark Brody's of the world, we're really thinking of strokes gained as new statistics. How can we help players find their weaknesses? And as a playing professional, and importantly, I think of a failed playing professional, I was always just like, I traveled with Chad Campbell and Chris Riley on the Hooters tour. I just remember playing practice rounds with these guys, and I was just like, not Chad. Chad was so good. It was ridiculous back then. But I was like, I feel like I'm not that far off from these 2 future Ryder Cuppers, but I'm not having anywhere close to their results. And so naturally, when strokes gained started coming out, I'm like, well, if we know how many strokes it takes to hole out from any inch on the golf course, from any starting lie, and I know now because of launch monitors like a GC Quad, how big shot patterns are, like now it's just a math problem to solve course management. So that's what I did from 2011, 12, and 13.
So
really,
so what, Moneyball was like, 2005, 2006, something like that. So you kind of, because that was obviously put baseball in the stats, whole thing. And then you started doing it for golf then.
And it would be interesting to know how much that impacted me, because that's one of my favorite movies ever. I mean, again,
Great movie.
Yeah. I mean, I can't not watch it when Netflix pops it up as a recommendation or whatever. Like, some of the scenes are just so funny. It's just amazing. And so I just started thinking down those lines. And then now we can actually talk about 2009 again. So Will Zalatoris' dad the Zalatorises were in San Francisco. His dad was transferred to Dallas to be the asset manager of the Galleria Mall and some other hotels here in town, who I already sold electricity to. And so I get a phone call. I mean, the story's crazy if you actually think about it. I get a phone call from Rick Zalatoris. Again, Will's 9 at the time. I obviously don't know who he is. And I get a call from Rick, and I'm getting fired. Like, he's the new asset manager. He's going to tell me, hey, I'm going with my guy. Thanks for the help. And I go in and I've got on a Bent Tree Country Club logo. And he's like, oh, do you play golf? And I'm like, well, this is my only chance of keeping the business. I'm like, yeah, I mean, actually on the Corn Ferry tour right now, as probably random as that sounds, but I entered Q school last year and got through. And he's like, oh, I've got a 9-year-old that you just would never believe watching him hit a golf ball. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure. 9-year-old. But it saved me keeping that business for another 15 years. But then we went out and played golf that weekend. I was like, holy shit, this kid, his golf swing looked identical. It was just smaller. He didn't miss the center of the club face as a 9-year-old. It was just
that's just crazy. Like, when did he pick up a club for the first time? I mean, if you doing that at 9, like that's insane.
I mean, it just literally his golf swing. And it's funny because I would love to actually see a video of it. I'm sure he has it, to actually see how accurate my recollection is. But I definitely remember the first time I saw, like the first shot, I was like, wow, that was a cute little motion. And it was right out of the middle of the club face. Like that was pretty cool. And so to watch him as a junior qualify for the US Junior at 12, 13, 14. And again, this is when I was playing on the Corn Ferry Tour with limited status. So it's not like I actually had that many starts. But so he's the 9, 10, 11-year-old out there that's just wearing me out, wanting to do chipping and putting contest. And I'm like, whatever, man, let's go and playing with him. But I wasn't, again, like, I wouldn't even say that I was like mentoring him then. And in hindsight, I definitely was, because we'd talk about how to hit certain shots and whatever. But like, I'm sure 90% of the strategic advice I gave him was just cliche crap that I've now disproven. But so it's just interesting watching this guy, because he really started obviously struggling with his putting when he was probably 14 or 15 or something like that. And so, I mean, here's a kid that never won an AJGA. Like, he was ranked 3,300 in the world when he graduated from high school. Like, he wasn't getting it done. And so I just remember telling him when he was 15, because I don't remember if he shot a million in the qualifying or got knocked out in the first round, but I just told him, I was like, trust me, dude, if you just keep doing what you're doing, you're going to win the US Junior. Like, you are just going to. And I highly doubt I meant it. I was just trying to keep him positive, you know? And so 2014 rolls around. Now, once the strokes gained statistics had come out, like the full catalog, not just strokes gained putting, I was like, I didn't even know that was coming. Like, oh, now this is just a math problem. This is just going to be easy to solve. So then I wrote a 500 million cells of Excel code, which sounds way cooler than it actually is. That's just a whole lot of cutting and pasting, but came up with what I thought like is a math-based system. And so a couple of weeks I was having some, it's funny, actually, my elbow surgery was 3 years ago today. But I was starting to have elbow problems. I played in the 2013 US Mid-Am and caught a root on the second hole and screwed my elbow up, shot a smooth 83 in the first round in Birmingham, and drove to Shreveport and gambled instead of waiting around to play the next day. And so the 2 weeks before the Texas Amateur here in Dallas, I went and got a cortisone shot in my right elbow, and the doctor paralyzed my arm. Luckily, just for 2 days, which is still too many days to have your arm paralyzed, and start running the iterations of like, you couldn't give me $100 million to go through the rest of my life without the use of my right arm. Like this is not.
That had to be scary. I'd be like, is this thing coming back? Or
I was literally cooking dinner one night, and my arm was just curled up like this, and all of a sudden, over like 30 seconds, it just slowly released down, and then just came right back. It was the spookiest feeling ever. Again, I wouldn't suggest going and getting a nerve pinched off in order to do that, but it was pretty damn cool. So, but the guy said, he's like, look, man, you can't play golf for like 6 months. You just need to let whatever inflammation's in there get out of the way. You don't want to do any damage in there. And I'm like, if you only knew how much work I've been putting in on something. I mean, again, it's just crazy looking back at how lucky all of it is. So I called Will and I'm like, I can't play in the Texas Am now. Let me caddy for you. And if you just do what I tell you to do, you're going to win this thing. Because I'm like, I don't care how bad his putting is. He's got to be getting out there and just freaking out or letting the missed 4-footer implode the next tee shot. Like, there's just no way. And so we had lunch and I kind of explained to him everything that we were going to do.
So I gotta like, so you make all these cells, you do all this like just incredible like work. Like how many days, weeks did that even take to where you have a theory of like, okay, this is my math problem solved, and I can like take this out? Like, was that?
It was a good 6 months of work. I mean, it was a lot. I downplay what it was, but my electricity company is all residual based, so I've kind of got some free time. And so once I quit playing again the second time in like 2012, I really did have a lot of free time. And so I was able to play more golf, able to put a lot of effort into this before I called it Decade. And so I went out and caddied for him. And it's just crazy. This is how beat down this kid was. He shot 67 or 68 in the first round, which it was a great round. I mean, but it's not like this life-changing, oh my God round. But he sent me a text after the first round. They're just like, I'll never know how to repay you for today. And I was like, dude, that was the first round. Like, slow down. I mean, it's just that, but that's how beat down this kid was. And I only know it because like I've been there too in this freaking game where it's just such a beating. And so it was amazing. And so obviously he goes on to win the Texas Amateur by 4 that year. And it was just amazing to watch. And again, this is what's so funny about it is kid hits it so good it's ridiculous. So obviously I'm giving him targets with a sand wedge that are basically at the flag, but with a 7-8 iron that are probably like 5 or 7 yards towards the middle of the green from the flag. And this kid hit every single shot for 18 straight holes exactly where I told him to. And I was driving home thinking to myself, I'm pretty sure if he would have aimed at every single flag today, he would have shot lower. Like, I'm seriously questioning all this work. But then I'm also like, that was the most ridiculous ball striking round I've ever seen. Like, it just, every single shot was exactly where I told him to hit it. And what I would really love to know in hindsight is, how was his distance control, though? Because there's 2 coordinates in a golf shot, direction and distance. So while, yes, he might have been hitting it directly at our target, he might have been 5 or 6 or 7 yards short or long each time, which would put him in that 15 to 20 foot range that he probably had anyways. The geometry of it's really crazy how you've got to get both direction and distance right for it to really matter. Otherwise you're 20 feet instead of 25 feet, or just kind of rounding errors. But he hits all the par 5s and 2 and birdies all those and doesn't make any bogeys, and just the easiest round ever. And so, that's essentially the genesis. And then, he qualified for the U.S. Junior, which was here in Texas. It was in Houston. I mean, again, if the thing was in New Jersey, I would not have flown to New Jersey. I mean, I'm married with 2 kids, but I told my wife, I'm like, dude, this kid can win this tournament. And if he does, I don't know what I'm doing, but there's something cool going on. And so, and if he gets knocked out in the first round, I'll be home that evening. And she's a cool wife. She's like, sure, go for it. So
how'd it feel to be caddying instead of playing?
What's that?
How'd it feel to be caddying instead of playing?
Well, that's, in hindsight, that's the vast majority of what Decade actually is now. I can teach you the strategy component in a couple hours. I mean, the tutorial content in the Decade app, exactly how we picked all of Will's approach shot targets, is no more than an hour. And then we've got tee shots and putting and obviously other stuff. So all the tutorial content's maybe 4 hours total. But it's all of the mental stuff. And to be really honest, before I created the word Decade, I originally bought the domain beyourownCaddy.com because that's what I realized was going on. He'd hit a bad shot, obviously, every so often, and I would give him the most positive feedback ever. Like, no problem, dude. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to go about this. No big deal. But what's different is I actually meant it. Whereas you can try to say all that stuff to yourself, but you're just being rosy and BS-y. But when I was saying it to him, I'm like, no, dude, you can actually do this. And at that time, honestly, what's crazy is at that time we had played, I don't know how many rounds of golf together, a whole bunch. He had never beaten me a single time at the point that he wins the Texas Am and U.S. Junior. So theoretically, I would have won the Texas Amateur, which I would not have won the Texas Amateur. I mean, but that's just the shift in mindset. And again, that's why the first E of Decade is expectation. I mean, that is the basis of it all. And, so after he wins the U.S. Junior that summer, that's the SMU coach came up to me, Jason Enlow, he was at SMU when I was at Texas A&M, known each other forever. He came up to me, he's like, I don't know what you're doing with him, but I can tell something obviously is going on. Like, what are you working on here? And I'm like, it's all strategy and mindset, dude. It's just, and he's like, dude, that's what Bryson, DeChambeau needs. He's like, he fires at every single flag. Be thinking about how you could maybe teach this to him down the road. I'm like, okay, cool. We go to the U.S. Amateur, and Will was like 3rd out of the 312 in stroke play qualifying. He beat the world number 4, Marcelo Rozo at the time in the first round. He beat the world number 10, Jordan Ebrugge, who had just played in the Masters after winning the U.S. Pub Links in the second round. And in the third round, he runs into the hot hand guy named Zach Olson from Oklahoma State also, who Zach was 5 under through 15 and Will was 3 under through 15. Will would have beat every other player in the round of, I guess that's 16. He would have won every other match. He just happened to run into the hot hand. Otherwise, he for sure wins the U.S. Amateur that summer. And it would have been just this crazy story. And again, you brought up Moneyball, looking back at it, it is such a Moneyball story. This kid comes from out of nowhere, and that's what he almost accomplished. He almost accomplished a Moneyball-esque story that summer. And then when you fast forward, obviously a few more years to the Masters, when he finished second as a non-member, like that, I'm watching this going, dude, if Hideki can somehow die on these last two holes, we're making a movie. Like this is 100% going to be a movie. And
I
don't know how
remember
much I want
watching
people
that year,
picking him.
man. That was such a good. Oh, that was so much fun to watch. I mean, everybody was rooting for him, and I like Hideki too. But yeah, that was just one of those where it was a clinic. I mean, that had to be so surreal for you to watch that. Obviously, the Masters is my favorite place. I've never been there, but it's my favorite course, favorite tournament. For you to be watching that, I can't even imagine what was going through your mind.
It's funny. I'd actually never even put this together. The irony of why I was creating everything in the first place was simply because I wanted to win the U.S. Mid-Am, and it wasn't because I wanted to win the U.S. The Mid-Am. It's because I wanted to play in the Masters. Like that is my tournament of all tournaments. The U.S. Mid-Am is 100% my gig. And it's just crazy looking back at it that he actually, again, I never would have actually thought of it that way, but he almost won the tournament. That was the whole reason I made the stuff in the first place. That's really weird. I can't believe I'd actually never thought about that.
That's a great full circle moment right there. I mean, yeah, to do it at Augusta, and I mean that's honestly why I play all the mid-am stuff too. It's just can I get to Augusta, right? Like that's the goal. Were you have you been there a few times then?
I have. I went in 2005. 2005 with a bunch of buddies. Like that was definitely a bucket list thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then went back in 07, and then in 09, it's pretty cool. In 09, I had Corn Ferry status. So I could get in, and then the head pro, David Price, that from Bent Tree where I was a member at, he was always one of the main rules officials. So he got a ticket for my wife, and we went on, I believe it was Saturday. But what was cool about it was my wife was pregnant with our first child. And so she's wearing this like red and white striped, like she looks like Where's Waldo. And we're standing on the tee forever on number one, because I just want to watch Tiger tee off.
Yeah.
And as we're standing there, the Augusta member is like, sees her standing there in the front, just pregnant as can be. And he's like, why don't you have a seat? So there's like the little table with the umbrella and everything. And she's just sitting there on the first tee.
Like, just hanging out, just waiting for Tiger to tee off.
100% the craziest thing ever. Yeah, it was pretty.
Is that first hole as hard as it looks?
The bunkers are in a weird spot. The bunkers, the bunker on the right, it's like probably 270 or 280, something like that to get to.
Yeah,
and then it's like 310 to cover. It's a very, very difficult hole. The bunker on the right is extremely well placed, and then just the fact that it's like a dog leg.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, it's a great hole. And
Tiger's hit some really bad shots on that hole. That's why I ask.
Well, yeah, I mean, you get Tiger hitting his double crosses over there, like into the trees on 9. Like, there's all kinds of calamity that can happen.
Yeah. Oh man, that's cool, man. That's a super full circle moment, and honestly, kind of like perfect to where my goal was today, was just to kind of go through how Decade is so much more than just a course management principle and way to think. It really is wicked smart. Like I have a 5-pillar approach in my book to what is wicked smart golf. It's about having the right mental game, practicing like a pro, having the right putting mindset, wedges, and course management. And I think Decade really does like do all of that. So that's actually kind of where I wanted to start, was the mental game, because we talked about it a little bit last time. And I think that that's a secret, sneaky part of Decade that is so good. It's like, yes, I learned how to, pick the right shots off the tee, pick targets, but the mental stuff you have in there is incredible. And obviously you have so much playing experience as well, that I think that helps a lot too. You're not just like coming at it from a sports psychology background and you've never broke 90, right? Like you've obviously played at the highest levels, how important the mental game is. So I guess one of the things that really stuck out to me was Tiger and his routine. Can you talk about Tiger's routine and what that was like, how you tracked all his shots and what you kind of discovered and found the Tiger secret, if you will?
Yeah. So this was probably in 2008. I decided I was going to, again, yay, lucky me with my electricity company just sending me money. I decided 2008, I was basically going to play full-time professional amateur golf. I mean, that was the whole goal, was, again, I was really going to go all in for the US Mid-Am that year. And so one of the things that I really struggled with whenever I was playing professionally was just my brain. I was the biggest hothead ever. I always chalked it up to my dad was a hothead. And honestly, what's funny is
I'm raising my hand here. My dad's got a little bit, and
well,
I
always
got
just
it
was like,
too. I
yeah, I
get
was
it.
always like, my dad's a hothead, so I'm a hothead. It is what it is. It's funny. I've been playing some pickleball with my mom, and I'm like, oh, she's the competitive one. I'd never even put it together. She's where I got it from because she's 75 and plays 3 hours of pickleball a day. And the other day, she's like, I'm just not playing good right now. And I'm like, that's the funniest thing
That's
I've
incredible.
ever heard. Yeah. And so, um, what was the question? What were you,
Just
what
Tiger and
was,
is just how
oh, Ty,
consistent
I
his
was like, I know
routine
there was a
was.
specific point. So I was definitely just like, I'm going to dissect this guy's brain as best as I can as a third person. And be perfectly honest, man, if I only understood meditation more at the time, like meditation is Tiger's superpower. You can talk about his physical game all you want. His brain, and again, just saying his brain is like, okay, that's not really helpful. His brain, because of his meditation routine, is his superpower. But as I was sitting there, I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to learn everything I can. And I just started watching his routine. And I'm like, dude, this is amazing. It's the exact same thing every single time. And so then I started like timing them from the time he would take his first step to impact. And it was always just like 13 seconds on approach shots. Like it was really impressive. I'm like, if you think about it, like it was 2 looks to the target. Like you could, again, as in the app, I've got a video where I've got like 9 of his swings from the US Open in 2000 that they're not superimposed. They're all just synced up and they're just identical. I mean, they're literally identical. And if you think about it, like the point to that is if you're doing the same thing physically, it's a pretty good indication that you're doing the same thing mentally. You're not over a ball on number 10 at Pebble Beach with an ocean on the right and thinking, well, don't go right on this one. You've picked your target. You're locked in. You've picked a target that takes the ocean into consideration. So now it's just a non-factor. And I think that's for amateurs, especially, the 5 to 15 indexes, and obviously even worse players, because they're just like, well, don't go left. So now they're going to really like just push this thing out to the right. And they're like, well, now I'm fading it. I'm cutting it. So now I'm going to aim further left. And like, no, now you've just made the problem worse. You made your path further left. Tiger just picked his target, was fully committed and fully locked into it. And again, that's, in my opinion, where his driver started getting a little wonky while he was working with Haney. That's when, instead of the 2 looks on autopilot, sometimes it was 3, sometimes it was 1, sometimes it was 2. It was all over the place. And I think that's just some indecision going on where he's just not quite as comfortable. And it's just so interesting because I would love to talk to him someday about that specifically and be like, did you know you didn't quite have what you had? I mean, when he was with Butch, the dude was hitting 70% of the fairways for like 3 years in a row, plus or minus 1%, 70% of the fairways. Like the golf ball has
And long
never been
too.
driven.
Like he wasn't like hitting it. Yeah, I mean, with a steel shaft. Like just
That's
crazy.
the best the ball can be driven, period. I mean, there will never be a person hitting it with the ball speeds, because he had to be in the 175 to 80 plus, I'm assuming, just because of the carry numbers. I mean, he had to be carrying it probably, 310 ish. So that's a 178 or 80 ball speed probably, with that 43.5-inch steel shafted Cobra driver,
just crazy,
and hitting 70% of the fairways. Like he just didn't hit foul balls ever. And again, I know we're talking about the mental side, but I do believe that for the guys that I've talked to, Hal Sutton, David Ogre, and the older guys that played with him back then, they were like, he cut the driver. Like that's what he did. There might be a time or two he tried to draw it, but he basically cut the driver. And once he started working with Haney and Foley and even Como, who again, I love like a brother, but they were also focused on that 9-box drill, which I think is great for irons. I shouldn't say that. I think it's okay for irons, but the driver should just be the same thing over and over and over again. And the only player that people throw in my face that doesn't do that drives it well, is Rory. And I'm like, okay, so there's
he's
a
a
unicorn.
child. He's a phenom too. I mean, yeah,
He's a phenom,
kind of an outlier.
and he's also 5'10", which I understand is the average human height, but like that's shorter for a male professional golfer these days. And so drawing it from a little bit shorter stature and again, strong as an absolute ox, that's a little more doable. But even still, I would say that Rory overdoes that from time to time. But the rest of the great drivers all do the same thing over and over and over again.
And like when you showed it too in the app, like when Tiger hit bad shots, it was 9.5 or 10 seconds. Like he was visibly just taking longer over the ball.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I mean, the first time specifically, I went back through and I think it was like the 13th hole of the U.S. Open at Bethpage, whatever year that was, like 04 or 05.
Mm-hmm.
I literally went specifically trying to find the first time he would not take two looks with the driver, because it was obvious he was doing that in like 07 and 8. And I called Sean Martin from the PGA Tour media and was like, can you get me as much footage of Tiger as possible? And they literally sent me this box of like 500 CDs. I mean, this is how long ago it was CD-ROMs of all of Tiger. It was actually amazing. I wish I still had it. I probably do somewhere.
Got to find a CD player too, or DVD player.
Yeah, exactly. But just to rip them all off of it with the company. But I literally am sitting there just watching in my office and just going to the next drive. And finally, it was on 13. And it was the first time he kind of took his second look was kind of like hesitant. And I was like, and then he took a third one. I was like, oh my God. And then he missed the fairway. And that was the only fairway he missed in that. I think it was the final round. It was either the third or the fourth round. And it was the first time. And again, it's just showing something was going on. It was like confirmation of what I had thought, that giving a different amount of looks meant something different was going on in his brain. Mm-hmm. And you can just see him kind of hesitate. He definitely was not committed to that shot.
Have you read the book Golf's 8-Second Secret by Mike Bender?
No.
So the whole principle is he studied all the major winners who have won at least five majors. So there's only 10, 12, something like that. All but one of them have a routine that's 8 seconds or less by the time they're over the golf ball. So walking into it's about 12, 13, but standing over it is 8 seconds or less. The only one that was the exception was Jack, who was very methodical.
I was going to say Jack could waggle.
Yeah. So, but other than that, everyone else was automatic. He talks about a lot in the book too, different meltdowns that have happened. And they were with guys that were breaking their routines. They were spending 10, 12, 13 seconds over the ball. He mentioned Lee Westwood being one of those guys.
How old is that book?
I don't know when it actually was released. I read it about 2 years ago, and it was probably right when I started going through Decade. And I was like, man, there's a lot to this. And then I read the European Tour study they did with RSM Consulting, where they tracked 25,000 shots, and they found something very similar. And so that's when I was like, man, there's a lot to the routine for the mental side of things with timing and just less time over the ball, less lingering, and you hit it better. And then I went through Decade, and you confirmed everything there too.
That's interesting. There's an article right here that's the 8-second rule. Are you standing over the ball too long? And it's from December of 2016 in Golf Digest.
Yeah. Fascinating. So that's why, I tell everyone to speed up pace of play.
I've got that open. I'll definitely get that book and read it. That's
it's short too. It's like 150 pages, but they break down a lot of the good, some of the worst meltdowns that are like hard to watch in majors. And it's usually when players broke their routine. Phil Mickelson at Winged Foot. He mentions, like I said, Lee Westwood. Talked about Phil though, when he played the British, and when he won that one, his routine was like 6 seconds. So yeah, it's interesting. And I know you talked about that a lot. And I just feel like you also talked about like kind of talking out your shots. And that's something that I really started doing in practice and in competition, is like giving your mind like clarity, right? Like, hey, here's our target, here's our distance. I think that's huge. Like when you kind of had us like, cause then you time it right. And like you said, if you're doing the same physical motions and you're have the same mental thoughts, you're just not having that like, don't fuck up thought, or don't, hit it right. Don't top it. Don't do whatever, like come into your mind. Cause you're just,
if you do, it screams at you. You're like, whoa, wait a second.
Right.
I mean, so those thoughts still happen. I mean, again, that's the point of meditation, is those thoughts still happen, but you recognize them, as opposed to just being obliviously just lost in thought. I mean, that's the key to it all, in my opinion, is crazy stuff is still going to come rambling into your head, but you start becoming more aware. And so what you're talking about there is talking out loud. Like I've got the video in the Decade app where I literally strapped a GoPro to my head because I was trying to illustrate what back in 2008, 9, and 10, I used to go to the other end of the range so I wouldn't look like a psychopath, and just literally talk. I would just be like, okay, I've got my spot in front of the ball. I'm walking in, I'm squaring the club face, check, squaring my body, that line, check. And my swing key today is blank, go. And I did that I mean, probably for 6 months straight. Every single ball I hit on the range, I spoke that out loud, and then obviously took it internal eventually. But now if something weird happens in my brain, like I recognize it immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and sometimes you're like, well, that's a dumb thought, and just you don't have to back off. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's so much that you're just like, okay, I'm clearly not ready to hit this shot. Um, the main one of those is like when you're over a putt and you're not trusting your read and you're changing your read as you're over it. Like, dude,
That's the
start over.
worst. Yeah,
Start over.
exactly.
You don't know what the hell you're doing here.
I couldn't agree more. There is nothing worse than standing over a putt and you're like, I think this was left edge. Now it looks like right edge. I'm gonna play it in the middle, and you're like, what are you doing? And then you just
I
make
mean,
a
it's
bad
just
stroke. Yeah, just never good.
it's just the thing. I mean, I had a putt this year. It was a great putt. I shot 64 in the first round of the Texas Open, which is the professional, the Texas Open,
Yeah,
had the lead, which is a 50-year-old amateur, 144, 56 guys in the field. I've probably worked with half of them in some capacity through the Decade app in college. Like, that was one of the most satisfying rounds of my life, to just have
that's awesome.
Scott Fawcett with an A right there. But then in the third round, it might have been the final round, I had a putt on like the 12th or 13th hole where I'm kind of farting around a couple under par or whatever. And I've got a putt from like 8 feet that I've just read. It is just dead straight. I am not reading anything into it. And it's like, okay, just the knowledge that this is the hardest putt in golf. Like, it probably is going to move one way or the other. Like, it probably is, but you don't know which one, or a little bounce or whatever. Like, this straight 8-foot putt is literally, and I was like, well, you need to commit to it. You need to hit the best putt you can. And then importantly, you need to laugh when it goes one way or the other and not think, I should have known that. That's why this putt is hard. And again, that's what I think a lot of the Decade expectations is about, is teaching you, like, accept that in advance. Like, this shot is harder. This putt is difficult. I've posted something on Instagram today where I was out doing some work with Chris Nickel from My Golf Spy, and I was trying to hit this flop shot over a bunker. And then I was like, because the last thing we can do is hit this shot that just comes up short.
You hit it pretty good.
I just hit it 2 feet further than I intended to, which made it land right in the fringe, which made it go tight. And I was like, that was actually the opposite of my point. I need to be trying to land it 3 yards on the green, so the shot I hit too soft lands in the fringe and goes there. That one I was trying to show a point and land it short, and I hit it a little harder than I meant to. Your mistakes on difficult shots, especially, your mistakes wind up becoming your great shots. And that's kind of the key to everything. I really think that once you're playing correctly, you're maybe if you got a sand wedge in your hand, you're taking dead aim or whatever. But after that, I mean, Sean Martin, again, back to that guy, Sean Martin, I need to get some money from him for pimping him all the time. But Sean Martin from the PGA Tour, when Zalatoris hit the hole-in-one at the U.S. Open in 2020, the one that Bryson won, he hits a hole-in-one, and Sean Martin tweeted, Zalatoris just hit a hole-in-one from 210, and the only thing Fawcett will want to say is that he wasn't aiming at the flag. And I was like, he probably wasn't. And so I sent Will a text just saying, what was your target? And he replied, 7 right. So I retweeted Sean saying, with that image saying he wasn't. And that's important for people to understand, because that round, actually, later on in the round, he hit another ball that hit the pin, and it nicked the pin. Like, that thing should have gone in. It nicked the pin for 2 hole-in-ones in a round of the U.S. Open, and neither one of them, the best ball striker on the PGA Tour, was not aiming at the flag. If that's not the definition of luck, I don't know what is.
Yeah, that's just crazy how I remember you talked about that in our last podcast too. You said a lot of guys that you'll work with, they'll know they're aiming right at the flag, but then they'll be like, maybe I'll just pull it back a little bit towards it. And like you said, you're like, you never practice that. Why would you try and do that? But we've all guilty of it at times.
Well, that's the best video I think I have that I've ever found is Tiger when he was in the booth at the Hero. So Como had started working with Tiger. It's funny when you look back at it all, the sequence of events. I create Decade 2013-14, caddy for Zalatoris, June, July of 2014. Como got hired in August of 2014 by Tiger. That's actually how I first got access to ShotLink, was through Tiger. He probably doesn't know that still to this day, but that's how I first got access to it. And it's just crazy going back and just looking at it all.
Yeah, you got all these full circle moments coming out. I love it. That's why I love talking with you. I always get some good stuff. One of
Yes.
the things too, like with my
Oh,
audience.
wait, let me finish, because I was
Oh
like, what
yeah.
was the point of that?
No, yeah.
So Tiger is in the booth at the Hero. Like, I just wanted to go watch this thing. And I had already gone through by hand 20,000 of Tiger's shots, like reverse engineering what his strategy was. And not surprisingly, it basically perfectly matches Decade. So he can say all he wants to that he takes the the leaderboard and all this other stuff into consideration, but it doesn't shine through in his shot link images. It just doesn't prove out that way. But so whoever it was in the booth asked him, Tigers, you've gotten older. Do you think you've played more aggressively or more conservatively? And Tiger's answer was, I've always played aggressively 100%, but I play aggressive to my spots. And so wherever that spot is, I'm playing aggressive to it, but it might be more on the conservative side, but I'm still playing aggressively to that spot. I'm like, that's not the question. The question is, are you firing at flags? To your point, what you just said, we're aiming away from pins and then hoping we pull or push it. I mean, I've had this conversation with literally 70 players on the PGA Tour at this point, and they all have agreed, except for Tiger, dude, I aim away from flags and hope I pull it all the time. And it's like, now you're, by definition, this is a hard shot. That's why you're aiming away from the flag in the first place. And now you're putting a wishy-washy, non-committed swing on that. And it's like, you don't have to hope you pull it. If you aim at the white flag on the driving range at 150 and you're good at what you're doing, roughly half the shot should be left and roughly half the shot should be right. You will almost by definition pull it half the time. You don't have to hope you pull it. It's going to happen. And this is why the key to golf and Decade and math and probabilities and expectation management and everything is simply, we're trying to avoid bogey way more than we're trying to make birdie. Like, that's the way it works. And I know people feel like that's a defeated way of going about it and scared, and okay, then keep shooting 2 or 3 shots higher than you need to every round. Like, knock yourself out. But if you want to stop feeling like you should have shot lower, you don't feel like you should have shot lower every round because you feel like I should have made 6 birdies today. It's because you did stupid stuff. Like,
as someone that has a lot of competitive experience, and I have a lot before Decade and a lot after Decade, I can 100% agree with you there, because yeah, I would definitely just hope for, I'd hit the draw to the back left pin. I'd try and do this. You end up short siding, just doubles, just wasted shots. And there's just nothing worse to me. And that's where I wanted to ask you about, was like blow up holes and just like wasting opportunities. Cause like the number one thing when I survey my audience is blow up holes. And a lot of times I feel like it is anger related after hitting a bad shot. And I know, like you said, you used to be really angry. I've had some very, very bad moments. I threw a 5-wood in a lake one time, never got it back. So, I mean, I've had some bad moments myself on the anger front.
Broke every single club in my bag during a lesson with Como one year.
That's legendary. I mean, the shafts, man.
Every single club.
The wedge shafts are okay to break. That's an easy fix. But oof, the driver, 3-wood, those are a little costly.
I'm starting over.
So how have you, no, I'm just trying to figure out how you have went from being able to break every club to now you're, I know you talk about meditation a lot. You have all this, like, I know that it is so key to, blow up holes to me are 2-pronged. They're usually from playing too aggressively and from not letting the last shot be done. And you're still pissed off over the next one and you hit another bad one. So,
but how I would define what you just said as your second point, how I would define that, instead of, because just to put it in simple language, is you quit. And I use the word quit because it's so inflammatory. Mm-hmm. But if you did something that you, before the round, would have said, I'm not going to do that, mm-hmm. then you quit. That is the definition of quit. If you punt strategy, if you punt patience, if you punt discipline, you have quit on what your intention for the day was. And I can only say that because I used to quit in every single round of golf. And I used to think, after a 30-minute bogey double combo, God, if I could go back, I would do that differently. And again, the number of tour players who have said, I have thought that exact same thing 1,000 times. None of us are unicorns. Like, I don't think any of us have this amazing way that we're going about life that drastically different than anyone else. And so it's why I feel not comfortable talking about the dumb stuff I do, but it's like, hey, here's a dumb thought I've had. Have you had it too? Because I bet you have. And that's the key to it all, is when you get in the trees and you're like, God, I really don't want to make bogey here. Like, okay, well then you shouldn't have hit it in the trees, because right now where you are, you're making bogey. Just don't make double. Don't turn a 74 into a 75 or an 81 into an 83. Like, every one of these shots count. And again, it's funny because what's been cool over the last however many years is I had a lot of ideas, I'll say, that were just anecdotal to an N of two, me and Zalatoris. I mean, I caddied 100 rounds for this guy over the course of 4 or 5 years. Like, so it's not just me based on my playing experience. It's me based on watching this guy through an objective lens of, I'm just watching, I'm just observing. And we just all do the same dumb stuff over and over and over again. It's just, I mean, like, if the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, then we are all literally insane. I mean, this is a revelation I've had over the last, I don't know if it's 6 or 9 months, but it's definitely been within the last year. I used to go, I've said this story a million times. I would go to Chili's or the Outback with my buddies that I was traveling a Hooters tour with. We'd all laugh about the dumb shit we did that day. And then I would go out the next day and do it again. And it never dawned on me, because I thought, well, I'll stop doing that once I get better. It never dawned on me that, you know what, maybe you can't get that good. Maybe with this sand wedge and the pin 3 or 4 from the left edge of the green, maybe it's actually physically impossible off of grass with a little bit of wind to, I mean, I can sit here in my simulator all day and keep my shot pattern super narrow, but maybe that's actually an impossible goal. And so maybe even from 100 yards with a sand wedge, pin 3 from the left, maybe you need to aim at 2 yards right of that pin. Maybe you don't actually have to get better. Maybe you just need to pick a little bit better target and be a little bit more patient and disciplined. That is for sure the main thing that I have learned, figured out, whatever you want to call it, over the last, 3 to 5 years. I mean, so again, this is definitely post-dating decade. It's definitely post-dating, teaching it to Zalatoris and DeChambeau and Maverick and Doc and a whole bunch of players who've done some great stuff, where I'm just like, maybe it's not about getting physically better. It's about just being a little bit more intelligent.
So when you hit a really bad shot, do you still get that anger, or do you still have that, like, do you have that moment where you're like, oh, that's expected, you know, I'm going to hit a bad shot here or there?
100%. I broke a club this summer in my USAM qualifier. I mean, again, I'm not immune to stupidity. I will say, my wife was caddying for me, and she likes to give me a hard time. Like, you broke a club. I'm like, to be perfectly honest, the reason I did, I've hated my gap wedge this entire year. I love the ping, the Mickelson, not ping, the Callaway Mickelson grind, 60 degrees. It's one of my favorite clubs I've ever had. And so as a result, I bought the sand wedge, and they don't make a gap wedge. So I bought the sand wedge. I bought another sand wedge and bent it to my gap wedge. And I've hated it all year, but I don't play enough golf to fix it. And so finally, it was like the 34th hole. I wasn't going to make it, and I put it over here left on this par 3. It was like a 240-yard par 3 where I slipped. So this is actually, hadn't thought about it this way. One reason I tell players to not get mad about, like, don't sweat the small stuff, is because it builds. So, like, let's say you miss a 7-foot putt and you react and you're like, damn it. Well, now if you walk up to the next tee and you happen to hit a bad drive, you've kind of primed yourself for some anger. And I probably needed to play the last 4 holes 3 under, maybe 2, 3 or so under to qualify. And I've got this 240-yard par 3. I have this right foot slip that's terrible. It's this overseed, wet, dewy grass, and my right foot just completely slips out, and I just chunk hook this 3-iron, just completely dead, to where I'm like, if you gave me bogey right here, I would take it in a heartbeat. I have no way of making par aside from pure luck. And so I'm pissed off because I'm like, that was my fault. That's my swing, whatever it is, I slip on my right foot. But I get up there and I'm completely dead. But I'm like, I've got to try to just get lucky and thread. There was like this tiny hole that I could hit a gap wedge through from like 30 yards left of this green. I bet. I mean, again, this is where it's like
you had the window. You had to try it.
It's qualify or not. Like, this isn't a golf tournament where I would have been like, if it's a golf tournament, let's just try to make sure we don't screw this up too much. But I'm like, I'm going to fire it through this tiny hole in the tree, and it doesn't make it, not surprisingly. And I just launched my gap wedge into the tree, which broke it. But so I had actually completely primed myself to be pissed off. But then the bad shot and just a screw this gap wedge. I'm going to make sure I never hit it again. I'm going to break this thing. And actually, what's funny is that shaft is right there.
Got a little reminder of it. Yep.
That is the shaft of that club, because I'm like, it's sitting next to, I'm going to grab it. Hold on. That's actually really funny. Somehow this came up.
Goes to grab the sandwich. I love it. I love it.
This is my first golf club.
Okay.
And this is that shaft, because I'm like, that's the last club I'm ever breaking. And but I say break, like just bent, obviously.
Yeah.
But that's it.
I've been
right next
again.
to
There's no judgment. It's just good to hear, because I meditate. I've done hypnosis. I do fucking mindfulness. I do everything. I run this podcast. I talk to wicked smart people all day, but sometimes
mushrooms.
It's mushrooms. That was
the next step, man.
That is the next step, because it's just like that Hulk rage. Sometimes it's just, I wish I had that 1 second to just like before you freak out and do something. And
well, so the point of meditation is putting a little bit of space between stimulus and response.
Correct.
And again, none of us are perfect. We are all human. But now everything I'm going to say for the next however long is going to basically probably be direct quotes from Sam Harris. So I'm not plagiarizing. It's impossible to stay mad for more than a couple seconds unless you are actively thinking about why you're mad. It's just literally impossible. And so when you get mad, it is totally up to you how long you stay mad for. Seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years. I mean, again, I've gone through a pretty nasty divorce from my first wife, and I was mad for years. And it's like, looking back at it, it's like, you were only mad because you were ruminating about stuff that had already happened. And that's the point of meditation. That's the point of Tiger. He was on, when he had his wreck a couple of years ago out in LA, he was out there actually doing these playing lessons with different celebrities.
Yeah, they were really good.
Yeah, and then, well, the one with Jada Pinkett Smith, I suggest everybody go watch on YouTube. Jada Pinkett Smith, Tiger Woods, it'll come up. But about 5 minutes into it, she says, you're just so calm out there. You just seem like you're playing in this, like hypnosis, meditating or something. He's like, that's exactly what I'm doing. He's like, I'm playing golf in a meditative state. And I'm like, finally, I mean, I knew through Como, obviously, and that he is a big meditator, but I just still didn't know what he did or does or how long or whatever. And so this was the first time that I'd ever actually heard him just explicitly say it. I played in the 1999 US Open. There's my little memorabilia from it. And I swear to God, most of the guys in the field literally thought he was playing golf like hypnotized, like pocket watch hypnotized. And it's like, oh no, he was just playing, like, the zone is actually just a moving meditation, like Tai Chi or something. And so she's like, oh, that's cool. I mean, he's like, I'm playing golf in meditative state. So, 5 or 6 minutes later in the video, they've now got this little snack station set up. And she's like, well, so what are your hobbies outside of golf? And he's like, I like to free dive. She goes, oh, really? That's interesting. Like, how deep do you go? And he's like 70 or 80 feet. And she's like, oh, shit, you're a real free diver. And he's terrifying. Like, yeah. And she's like, well, why do you like doing that? He's like, well, it gets back to that meditation we talked about earlier. It gets back to, if you're 70 feet underwater and something goes wrong and you don't have air, you better not freak out. You better control your heart rate. You better control your mind. I was about to say control your breathing. You are controlling your breathing because you're not going to breathe. You better figure it out. And then this is the key. She says, oh, well, so how long have you been meditating? And he just kind of smirks. He's like, since I was born. And I'm like, there you go. And unfortunately, like, nobody's going to catch up to him. I mean, it's just not going to happen. People ask me, when's the next Tiger Woods coming? And I'm like, I don't know. When's the next Vietnam coming? Because Earl met Tita in Vietnam.
Right.
A Green Beret army guy is not meeting a Buddhist contemplative woman on Bumble. Those profiles aren't passing each other. They are not swiping right or whatever you do on Bumble to each other. And so it was the perfect combination of Earl is a disciplinarian. And honestly, I've definitely come to learn that Tito was as much of a disciplinarian also that Earl was. But his Buddhist values, and again, I'm not a religious guy, but if you said gun to your head, you got to choose one, I would definitely choose Buddhism. Just solid Stoic Buddhist thinking is a pretty solid path to go. And it's just amazing when you hear a guy like that say it. He's just in control of his thoughts. And as a final statement on that, when after the shit hit the fan with his car wreck, and not the first car wreck.
I was going to say which car wreck. Yeah, we got to just not let him drive.
With all of his issues. The first interview he gave was with Tom Rinaldi on the back porch at Lake Nona. And Tom, first question is just like, what happened? And Tiger's answer was, and I would love to know if Tom was like, this is going to be your first question. Because it would be interesting to know if this was a spur of the moment answer or a thought out answer.
Yeah.
But Tiger said, I lost track of my Buddhist values. I lost track of my meditation practice. I just started thinking I was more than I actually am. I just did not hold true to my core values that got me to where I am. And it's like, first thought was I stopped my meditation practice. Like he was just a train wreck. And that's where I feel like you can see it in his pre-shot routine, to circle back to what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
You can see it in him on the golf course. And I mean, again, when he hit the shot on 16 in 2019, when he won the Masters, I've got a video on this in the Decade app. Like the whole place is going crazy. And by the time, I mean, that thing almost went in the hole. Like if that had gone in the hole, I'd have been like, okay, this is a simulation. Like this is totally 100%. Ridiculous. I mean, this is absurd. But this shot comes in, skirts right across the front of the hole, finishes 2 or 3 feet, whatever it was. And by the time this ball stopped and the camera got back to him, the whole place is going crazy. And he's just standing there, just as stoic. There's zero doubt in my mind he's actively meditating right there. He is just following his breath, whatever it is you want to call it. But he was on another planet right there. I mean, in his brain, he was literally on another planet.
Yeah, that 2019, man, that was fun to watch too, and that was a good full circle right there too, because there's just so much with Tiger. He has so many skills. Like he's just been good since he was 2. His short game's good. His putting's amazing. The other thing too with his routine we didn't really talk about was his putting routine. That thing is automatic. Like that is the same routine over and over again. And like you said, so I guess to round out the mental game section, get a routine, stick with the routine, and it'll basically be like a walking meditation, and it will help you kind of listen or understand if you do have those bad thoughts, and hopefully avoid some of those blow up holes. Because again, I can't tell you how many people will be like, all these blow up holes kill my round. I get that the number one DM. And so hopefully people
critical
can learn.
To that.
Yeah.
Critical to that is the 8-second rule. So when I said Tiger was 13 seconds,
yeah, that
was from him standing behind the ball. When he took the first step was when I would start the stopwatch, and then at impact I would stop it. So I bet he was. It had to be 9 or 10, so maybe a little bit higher than Mike Bender would prescribe, but I bet it wasn't far off. I mean, depending on
that's when
Mike
you're fully in your stance too. I feel like, because I looked at the videos when you have a Decade. I feel like if he went, like, not when he's wiggling around, once he's like in the stance, it's pretty much right at it. So I
bet it's spot on. I mean, again, so that's my point to the listener is this doesn't have to cause slow play. I think that's what
it
people
actually
get
does
wrong.
the opposite. Yeah,
100%. I mean, stop wasting time thinking about irrelevant stuff. Again, that's the key. Again, not to try to pimp the Decade app, but
please do.
Just learning how to pick a target that's based on math. And again, the math isn't difficult, so I don't want that to be scary to people, but it's a very concise way of picking a very good target. So we've picked a great target. There's nothing else to think about. Now we're just on the driving range. We have a target of the white flag on the driving range, or the left edge of the teaching center with your driver, whatever it is. You're not over the ball thinking anything. Don't go left, don't go right. Make sure it does this, make sure it does that. You're just doing what you do. And once you've picked the theoretical optimal target,
that's it.
There's nothing else to do.
That's it.
You're on a driving range. I get it. There's a number 17 at Sawgrass. I get it. There's a whole bunch of water everywhere. That's why we picked a target. There's nothing else to think about anymore. And again, I'm certainly not saying that's easy, but I'm certainly saying it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I think how you practice too will help you out with that, because you just talked about, like, you know, when you're at practice and you have a shed or something in the background, there's a great course I practice at, and there's a 2-sided range, and it's like a training center at the back. You got 4 garage doors. So it's perfect. Like, I just do driver practice over and over and over at the same target. It's boring, if you will, but it's what's needed. And it's just, so then when I'm on the course, I'm just figuring out my garage doors. You know, I'm just trying to figure out that
100%.
same target. So can you talk about block practice a little bit? Because that's kind of the second pillar of Wicked Smart Golf. And I've learned so much from you about practice too. But specifically just like what people should be doing, because I'm a student. I just love going to the range myself, but then I'll watch people and just be like, what a waste of time so many people do. Just random shit, starting with driver, you know, always doing training aids. Like, there's just so many mistakes people make.
It's just exercise.
I know. I have that quote in my book from Harvey Penick. It is just exercise. So
is that really a quote from Harvey Penick?
It's really a quote. It is. I have to find it in my book, but I actually quote it because he said, funny. You know, it was something to the extent of like, hey, what are you doing out there? And I said, what do you think I'm doing? I'm practicing. And he goes, I'm seeing you out here. It looks like you're exexercising. It's essentially what the quote is. And that's exactly what it is.
It is. I mean, at the end of the day, it is. So
how do we practice?
There's a number of instructors who, in my opinion, overthink practicing. And they take studies from other genres, other sports. I mean, some of them, like the majority of them are like this, based on this study that says you'll learn your math multiplication tables better if you don't just go 8 times 8 is 64, 8 times 8 is 64, 8 times 8 is 64, and you 8 times 8 is 64, 8 times 9, like, and move on. And I'm like, but I don't really understand how that applies to golf. Specifically, the one that's in sports is a guy from Arizona State did a study showing that the college programs that use live pitch batting practice, those players tend to go on to the major leagues more than the facilities that use T-ball or pitching machine. And I'm like, I got 2 problems with that. First, how did you control out the fact that the bigger programs are the ones that use live pitch? Like, you're not using live pitch at Sam Houston State. I'm not ragging on Sam Houston State. That's where I went my freshman year. Actually got a pretty good baseball program. That probably was the last place to use. But a bigger program is going to use live pitch because they've got more assets. The bigger problem, though, is how did you control out paying attention? Because if a human is throwing a fastball at me at 90, I'm going to be paying a lot more attention than if a pitching machine is throwing a fastball at me at 90. That's the key to practice. Whatever it is you're doing is figuring out how to pay attention. And so the studies, when these instructors try to use them, show like, well, all these different genres, all these different things show that randomizing your targets and randomizing everything makes you practice, it translates better to the course. And I'm like, again, golf is a no defense, no shared ball sport. So using a study from any other sport, in my opinion, is highly flawed for that reason alone. I don't care what happens in baseball. I don't care. Tennis, like a serve is kind of close-ish, but after that, you're reacting to everything. So the ball could be anywhere. You need to be able to hit it anywhere. In golf, it's totally up to me where the ball is relative to me, and it's totally up to me when I start the action. So it's a non-reactive sport. So that's the vast majority of why those other sports do better, and I do believe they do better by randomizing your practice, randomizing everything. But like, I don't get it beyond that. I mean,
so you want pretty much most people to do block practice versus random practice? That
block practice means just hitting the same shot at the same target over and over and over again. And this is what I think the lay person, again, that the podcast I used to be on, Lou, whatever, I'm sure we all know who Lou is. Lou trotted this guy out the week after I quit to try to like throw shade at me for block versus random. And I'm like, you're going to get in over your head here on this one, man. And I actually felt bad because I just dissected the entire podcast. Like, this is just all flawed. And then I felt bad though. So I sent the guy from Arizona State. I'm like, sorry for that, man. You kind of got in the weeds here of this. But it's entirely about focus and paying attention. And so hitting the same shot, what I was saying with the layperson is when I spoke with the guy from Arizona State, he was like, well, I mean, you watch these guys on the range, they're just doing the same thing every single time. I'm like, no, they're not. Like the golf swing is inherently, it's got enough variability in it because they're trying to say like the brain needs to work these mapping processes and needs to reorganize itself for every time. Well, I did that wrong this time, so I'm going to do this right this time. And it's like, there's enough inherent variability in the golf swing, which is why the golf ball goes everywhere. There's enough of that already. We don't need to increase that. Again, I'll say, in my opinion, the key to all of this is I'm definitely not saying I'm right. I'm just saying, here's the flaws in what you're saying, because I do believe there are enough flaws that it's like, yeah, that study's not quite applied well here. That's not really applicable for this reason. I personally have witnessed myself as a good ball striker. This is what I do. I witness guys on the PGA Tour every single week. They've got their TrackMan set up. They've got their quad set up. By definition, they're not changing their target. You won't see a guy on the range at a PGA Tour event without his launch monitor anymore. Like,
yeah, I know. It's crazy.
And so by definition, they are not changing their target. Now let's go to the putting green. Every single one of them has a putting mirror, a line over their start lines, a chalk line, some sort of a contraption into their chest. Like, no one's just out there rolling putts. They've all got their block practice stations. And so this is where I feel like it's a bit intellectually dishonest for the instructors to say you have to randomize your practice while sitting behind the guys on the PGA Tour who are 100% not doing that. I mean, again, the key to all of this is, I don't disagree if you change your targets a bunch, you're probably going to slow down and pay more attention. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
But that's not exclusive to random practice. You can slow down with block practice. It just takes effort.
Yeah.
It takes understanding the point of slowing down. That's the key, in my opinion. And again, that's where, I know that this whole thing probably, I don't know how much video it is or not, but like when I practice and what I prescribe people to do is, okay, hit a shot, watch it. First of all, if you hit a shot and it was good, take a second and really feel in your body. Really, I don't disagree. The brain maps. Like, I totally agree with that. And so if you've got something, bam, hit a good shot. Really feel that. Stand there, hold your finish for another second. Let your body feel what just happened. But then what I do is you hit that shot. Now we pull another ball over. Ideally, we would get all the way behind it. No one's actually going to do that. So what I do is I pull the ball over. I take this last step. I always take that last step in and then come in. I'm never just pulling a ball over and standing here. And that's one of the reasons, honestly, that hitting balls in a simulator is so hard and potentially unproductive, is because it's really awkward to stand behind the ball. It's awkward to look left like you are downstream in on a driving range, as opposed to here indoors. Like, you've really got to double down on trying to pay attention when you're doing it indoors, because you can go brain dead really quickly.
Yeah, I feel like for me, when I started doing like your driver drill, I mean, that's the only thing I do with my driver now. And it's made me I have so much more confidence with that thing. It's probably my favorite club in the bag. Like, I just play my same shot, same thing, same routine, just feel like confident with it. And then, yeah, like you said, every once in a while, mix it up, change some targets. But for the most part, just doing that block practice is helping so much more than just randomly hitting balls and doing what everyone else is doing. And you also talked a little bit about putting practice. And I think that to me is like a huge, like, there's a lot I learned about putting too from Decade. That's why, again, I love it. It goes through all the pillars of my book and my program and stuff, is that like putting is one of those things where it's a low hanging fruit for the everyday golfer. Like, not everyone's going to be able to swing 160, 170, be able to do it, but putting's not that hard. I had your guy, Dr. Luke Benoit from Ripstick too. And, we talked a lot about how it's mainly mental. It's not really as much mechanical once you get it compared to all the aspects of a golf swing. So like, what should people be doing for putting practice too? Aside from using your Decade app, I love the drills in there. Those programs are great. What else do you see the pros do, or what else should people be doing for putting?
Speed drills, man. That's it. I mean, speed drill, speed drill, speed drill. You want, again, back to block practice. I've got right here in my home, I've got my arc right there. I've got my putting rod sitting right next to it. I actually have got this putting mirror right here from Short Game Gains. That's one of the main things you'll see out on tour from a block practice standpoint is some sort of a mirror to check their eyes. I've got it sitting right there because I just did a little promo for them. I literally don't promote any products ever unless I love them. This mirror is so good. It's ridiculous. Again, Short Game Gains, Frederick and Hannah from.
Yeah, they're great. They're actually here in Arizona, I think.
Yeah, exactly. They're out in Arizona. The reason I love this one is because it's metal. Like the eye line ones, I shouldn't have said their name out loud, but the other ones, they warp, they bend. You never really know where your eyes are actually at. This thing's amazing. Hey, that my putting rod is an eye line putting rod. So there we go. I just reversed my way out of it.
I use putting mirrors a lot too, inside, outdoors. Like I use the Back to Basics one. It's big enough for the shoulders to be in there too, which I like because my shoulders tend to get open a little bit. What do you like? I'm just curious because I know there's like some debate on like eyes over the ball, slightly underneath, slightly behind. Where do you like your like left eye to be?
I think anything except for outside of the ball.
Okay.
I think over the ball to inside, I honestly don't even know the number if that's an inch or two. I think anything like it doesn't have to be directly over the ball. It just can't be outside of the ball.
Right.
And I shouldn't say can't because I'm sure there's someone on tour that putts with it outside the ball, but you are going to be in unicorn land if you start putting good from outside the ball. And so back to your first question, though, of what should people be doing? This is where maybe you've noticed I get myself in social media. Not anymore, though, since I'm off Twitter.
I know you still got. You said you got into some beef or something on Instagram though a few weeks ago.
God! Well,
that's why you're the number one downloaded podcast, though, man. You stirring it up. I loved what you said, by the way, on that one.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. But I mean, like Zalatoris, perfect example. I get it. The guy's putting stroke isn't great. I'm aware. I've witnessed it up front for 15 years now, but his speed control is amazing because he only focuses on speed control. And so again, he was a little bit strokes gained positive in 2022, you know, his full year. Obviously last year was a lot of injuries with his back surgery and everything.
Yeah.
But he was a little bit positive. So he was an above average putter in 2022, even with that stroke, but he was second in approach putt performance, which is the average length of your second putt. So what he's done is he basically inside 10 feet is, if you look at the absolute number, he's in the 160s to 180s in every bucket inside 10 feet. But what you really got to dig into the stats to really realize if that matters or not is, well, so from 4 feet specifically, or it might be 3 to 5 feet, whichever one it is, he was 180 something in make rates. Tour average was 92%. I think it was 4 feet. Tour average was 90. And that was 3 to 5 feet. I would not have done it on such a small basis. So 3 to 5 feet. Tour average was 92%. He was 89%. It's not like he was 60%. I mean, it wasn't ideal, but you only have 2.5 putts per day from 3 to 5 feet. And he was 0.03 shots worse than average percent worse, which is 7/100ths of a shot. Like, it's not ideal. I'd rather him not be 7/100ths of a shot, but it's not the end of the world either. It's not like it's a quarter of a shot. But because he has great speed control, because he's not trying to make putts outside of 10 feet, he actually is above average. So if you just think of about 100th place, there's 200 guys roughly on tour every year. So about 100th place is going to be average. He's like 30th in make rates from 15 to 20 feet, 70th from 20 to 25 feet. He was 70th in 3-putt avoidance, which is, again, considering he's not great on short putts, but he's well above average in 3-putt avoidance. And that all comes back to the fact he's got great speed control. This is what's a little painful watching Scotty Scheffler struggle right now. I don't watch enough golf, so I have not been able to see, like, can you see a yip? Like, does he actually look yippy or not?
I don't watch much either because I can't stand all the PGA Live drama, but it is sad to watch his hit. I mean, to be number one in everything and then dead last in putting. I mean, I would rather be the exact opposite. There's nothing worse than hitting it well and putting like shit.
Oh, it's just brutal. I mean, again, but that's where what I can say about myself is, so as I said earlier, I played in the 1999 US Open and I was dead last by 4 total putts. I had 36 putts both days. Pretty abysmal. I shot 79.
I'm sure those greens were pretty challenging too. Let's give yourself a little.
They were pretty challenging, but looking back at it, I now as a 50-year-old know what a yip feels like. And I'm like, well, I definitely didn't have the yips back then. I mean, definitely did not have a flinch like I've
Yeah.
felt before now, unfortunately. But critically, I could do the drill that Tiger does where he's got two tees set up. I could do that and get my putter head through those things with very little room for error perfectly.
So just
So
a
the
speed
fact I
issue
know I
then.
didn't have the yips and the fact that I could do that drill, my start line was fine for sure.
Right.
And then my personal speed control, like putting practice, was just randomly rolling balls all around the green. And what I'll say is, after working with Cameron McCormick and watching what he does with Jordan Spieth, and Jordan, the year that he was probably 17, Brookhaven, his country club was closed down for a full year, just redoing everything. Obviously, he practiced a lot out at Bentry with Will, and I used to, it was when I was on the Corn Ferry Tour, and I used to watch this guy just do this speed drill all day long, and I'm like, what's this kid doing? And I'm like, oh, he's pretty damn good. Maybe you should pay attention. I went on to work with Cameron initially when I was first building the Decade app. He and I were partners. We were rebuilding his website to be Decade until he and I had a few differences of opinion on a few things, which probably isn't surprising if you know Cameron and know me. But the speed drills, I just modified them to where you're a little bit easier to do by yourself instead of having to have a caddy or a coach there. And that's all Will did for like 6 straight years, is these speed drills. And it works like magic. I mean, again, I hate saying it works like magic, but the 2 speed drills in the app specifically, the first one, the foundation speed drill, is what Zalatoris used for 5 years. Now that he's on tour, he's got a way that he's modified it to where it's easier for him to do because the putting green gets a little crowded. And here's the guy that was actually, with that stroke, no offense, Will, above average as a putter. And then Maverick McNeely, a kid that I worked with since he was in college, he is obviously the smartest person on the planet ish, but he's super smart from Stanford. And I only say ish because William Knauf is my other buddy that's at Columbia right now. He's actually the smartest person.
Got some wicked smart friends over there.
Yeah. Maverick was until I met him, but Maverick modified the basic foundation speed drill into a speed drill that works from 5 to 15 feet.
Okay.
And what we've learned from the data is that the best putters separate themselves the most from 5 to 12 feet. Maverick made this drill from 5 to 15 just because it's more symmetrical when you're setting it up. And there was your strokes gained putting leader from last year. So we got 2 drills in the app. One guy that with a terrible putting stroke is managed to be positive and second in strokes gained approach, or approach putt performance. And the other one was the modified version of it from a super smart guy who led this tour in strokes gained putting last year. Like, I can't tell you how many people have told me those 2 drills and then our simulated putting combine in the app are worth the price of the app alone. I've had more people tell me that the free yardage books and driving targets are worth the price of the app alone. Like, I really do hate feeling salesy, but it's just, the way.
Dude, I'm doing it for you on probably half my episodes. We're at like 230 right now. I bet I've talked about Decade in at least half or more. So don't feel salesy because it's just wicked good. Like, I love using the app because I get bored as shit when I'm practicing putting, but I go on the simulated one sometimes, or I do the speed one, and I just have something to do. And I love like the strokes gained on there. It's just like so much better. And it just gives me, and it makes me go through my routine. It makes me like just make the most of it. Cause how many times do you guys see guys just throw 3 balls on the green, putt for 5 minutes, and they call it practice, and then they go to the first tee and then they wonder why they suck on the greens. It's like, you have to like you said, just work on the full routine and the speed. If you get that dialed in, it's going to be a lot easier.
Well, and that's kind of what I started with talking about the U.S. Open was, so I had actually just finished my putting practice. So I'd probably been putting for 45 minutes when at the U.S. Open in 99, when Vijay Singh comes walking on the green. And he was at the time the notorious hardest worker in golf. And I was just
a grinder, man. He's still like putting in work at like what, 60? I mean, that guy's a beast.
But I was just like, I'm going to sit here. This is like my Kobe Bryant moment. I'm going to sit here longer than him.
Love it.
And what did I do? I just screwed off and talked with Chad Campbell when he came walking by, and Fred Couples, and like the few guys that I knew out there at the time. And I'm just randomly putting around. And finally, VJ, after like an hour and a half, packed up his stuff and left. And I'm like, ha, did it. And I'm like, looking back at it, I wasn't doing anything. I was just standing there or just putting randomly. He literally sat on that green and did some sort of speed drills. Did I observe what he did? No, I'm too stupid as a 24-year-old. I didn't even pay attention to what he's doing. I'm just sitting here just trying to stay on the screen longer than him. And he sat over there and did speed drills. Again, I shouldn't use Vijay Singh as some putting savant that we want to model what he did. But guess what? The dude made 80 some odd $million on the PGA Tour. He knows what he's doing. Watch that guy.
When you know all these numbers, like you're 8 feet, it's 50%. You know all these statistics. When you're playing yourself in competition, are you thinking about that at all? You having that top of mind in like
I don't have to anymore, but
okay.
I did.
Yeah, I mean I think it's a good thing though. I think like expectations are key. I used to just have shitty expectations, and then that's why I'd get so mad. It's like, well, the pros don't make more than half from 8 feet. Why do you think you're better than them?
Those first 2 years specifically when I was caddying for Will. So I just decided, you know what? I can't play any golf in 2014. So I'm just going to take what I would have been traveling to play in tournaments myself, and I'm just going to caddy for Will. So that's why I did Texas AM, US Junior, US Am that summer. But then each summer it was fun. So I did like the Pat Coast Am and the US Am or the Transmiss or whatever they were. Like I just went and caddied for them a couple times every summer. And those first 2 years, though, 2014, 2015, I for sure told him the expected value of every single shot before he hit it. So
full shots too, even.
Oh, yeah, every single shot. So we're 100 yards in the fairway, 2.8, man. Just so he knows, like, it's not that important to make birdie here. Making a bogey is really hard to get back. The key to all this is once you start thinking in fractions of a shot, this is similar to the idea, like just to put a concrete number on. When you're in the trees from 100 yards, they average 3.8 shots to hole out. So you've already hit one shot to get it in the trees. So now if you're in the trees, you're basically making bogey 80% of the time. And the key to thinking about golf mathematically, and again, I don't want this to seem too mathy or overwhelming if you're not a math person, but if you make a bogey from a spot where you should have made bogey 80% of the time. So you should have averaged 4.8 and you made 5. You lost 0.2 shots. Not that big of a deal. Yes, you made a bogey, so you lost a full shot against par, but par's really irrelevant. Maybe the hole had a 4.3 scoring average to begin with. Your bogey only cost you 0.7 shots. But if you make a double from that tree position, you've lost 1.2 shots against what you should have been. So instead of losing 0.2, you lost 1.2. Making double instead of bogey isn't twice as bad. It's 6 times as bad. That's the key when the light bulb goes off for most people. It's like, well, a bogey only lost me 1 shot war. Well, if we can only lose shots fractionally, we can also only gain shots fractionally. So yes, when you make a birdie, you gained 1 stroke against par, but it probably didn't all come on 1 shot. It probably came with, you gained a little bit on the drive, a little bit on the approach shot, and then a little bit on the putt. So you hit a solid 300-yard drive in the fairway against PGA Tour that gains you 0.2 shots. You hit a solid approach shot to 8 feet and gained 0.5 shots. So now you made the putt and you gained 1.2 because the hole actually had a scoring average of 4.2. Like that's how the math adds up. And so once you start thinking of it through that lens, like you say, an 8-foot putt is 50-50. It's a coin flip. If you and I are sitting here flipping coins and you guess heads, it comes up tails, you don't think twice about it. You literally wouldn't think twice about it. You would just be like, okay, let's guess again. It's like the win rate on the PGA Tour. It's actually kind of ironic that what's his face won this week, whatever his name is from Oklahoma State.
I was gonna say I'm the worst. My PGA
Austin Eckroat. I knew I could get it. Austin Eckroat won in his 50th start. I always say a 2% win rate on the PGA Tour is a great win rate.
Yeah.
So here's
Not
a guy
all of us can have Tiger's 21%.
Yeah, I mean, here's a guy that won in his 50th start, so he's right on 2%. Like he's doing fantastic. It's like Kevin Chappell. He didn't win in like his first 100 and something starts, and then he finally won. But it's like, well, if a 2 or 3% win rate is good, and a 2 or 3% occurrence doesn't happen in 140 occurrences or trials, it's starting to get interesting. Like, man, you're kind of due, but it's also not like unheard of. What then becomes the problem is when you start freaking out and trying to force wins. It's similar to both Jordan Spieth, Colin Morikawa, so many players that have recently that have gotten out to hot starts with this like 10% win rate. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that's not going to stay
It's
there.
not
They're
sustainable. Yeah.
both going to go through.
But then announcers are like, oh, he started off good. He hasn't done it. It's like, he's just defying the odds to begin with, but then they make it seem like he's slumping. Right.
He will revert to the mean, just like Kevin Chappell should have won more in his first 140 starts. These guys should have won less. I mean, that's the difference in golf and in every other sport. If I'm playing you in tennis and I'm better than you, I'm probably going to beat you. If your name's not Federer, Nadal, or Djokovic, you probably haven't won a Grand Slam in the last 20 years.
Right.
I mean, that doesn't happen in golf because I'm playing all 144 of you at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't have to do that in tennis. I just don't have to do that in tennis. I play one guy, and if I've got an 80% win rate and we got to play 6 rounds, it's 0.8 times 0.8 times 0.8 times. And it's really like 0.95 times 0.95 times 0.9 times. I mean, like, he's got a lot of equity to use a poker term. Those guys have a ton of equity in the tournament from the start, just as long as they don't get hurt. Any golfer, Tiger Woods included, I could bet you're not going to win this tournament and be right, obviously, the vast majority of the time. Like Zalatoris, he's played, I don't know how many events at this point. I would think it's 60 or 80. I have no idea. He's only won once. I think that's pretty low for him. Well, he lost in a playoff. He's got a number of runner-ups. Like, he's not far. Shit, he's not far from having a Grand Slam.
I know, that's crazy. That's just crazy.
Aside from the British, he's almost won every major already. And instead, he's only got one tour win.
Yeah, well, I mean, you kind of just like talked about it too. I'm just like curious, like with expectations, like you talk about it a lot. I try and, share as much as I can. But I know a lot of guys are going out and they're playing in their first tournaments. I got a lot of people that listen or finally sign up for the first member, first member guest, first city, first whatever. Like, they're excited. And I try and just be like, hey, you got to have the right expectations, like heading in there. How important do you think it is to not have a score goal? Like, because I feel like you've kind of talked about it. Like, anytime you say you're going to go out there and just have like 6 birdies, yeah, it's, you're not Tiger. Like, why is that so important? Or what's your like mindset when you go out and, do you have any type of goal? Yeah.
It's irrelevant. I mean, obviously the goal is to shoot as low as you can. Like, I don't think an obvious goal should be a goal. Like, my goal is to win this week. Duh. Like, my goal is to make this putt. Duh. Like, what can you do? This is why the Nick Sabans, the Phil Jacksons, the Pete Carrolls, the Harbaugh, like all of the great coaches, you don't see them talk about goals. In fact, they run away from goals. They talk about process.
Yeah.
That's the goal, is how many good processes can I have? How consistent? That's why we track in the Decade app the mental scorecard, which is basically a self-reported statistic. How committed to every single shot were you at the end of the day? That's the only thing you can control. Once the shot's left your hand, man, it's out of your control. It just is what it is. I mean, it could go anywhere. And that's, you get a guy like David Duval, who was obviously the greatest, he was one of the greatest players of all time. Like, that guy was unbeatable for a number of years in a row. And then he obviously lost his game, but then he still had like a British Open and a US Open where he almost won them both, like in the middle of his slump. And what I believe is he's going into the British Open and he's knowing we're going to get some funky bounces this week. So I'm not going to let those things drive me crazy, because it's like, wow, that was a crazy ass bounce. Whatever, you move on. US Open, I'm not trying to get to 32 under. So I'm just trying to play good, solid, smart golf. I do believe that some of his issue was dealing with expectations and trying to be the number one player in the world, trying to be the major champion that he was. And it's like, well, again, I get it from college players every single year, where
I can't imagine with college players too, because it's like their livelihood. They're thinking this is their career, this is where they want to go, and like they're probably suffocating the life out of their game with the wrong expectations.
Well, and that's just all of a sudden one day they literally just stamp pro on their forehead, and so they're like, well, it's time to start doing it. It's like, it's the same game, man. I mean, it's the same game. You don't have to start doing it all of a sudden just because you're now a pro, and playing a little more patient and a little more disciplined. Like, it's so hard to do, because everybody wants it so bad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you just want to go out and win and play good, but you're just getting in your way. I mean, you're just categorically getting in your way when you have some expectation of a finish in a tournament. There's this high school kid that plays on my daughter's high school team here, and he sent me a text a month or two ago, maybe a month ago. He didn't play well in the first round, and he was like, "I got to go low tomorrow," and I'm like, "Why?" "Well, to get in the top 5." "And?" "Well, because that's what's going to help me." Like, and like, I'm going to keep saying and or why to every reason you're going to tell me you have to go low tomorrow. I get it. In order to finish in the top 5, you probably should go low tomorrow. But rather than shooting 81-81, wouldn't 81-73 be great? Like, than trying to force a 67 to get the top 5? Like, again, critical to all this is there's nothing you can do strategically to just force a low round on any given day. Otherwise, you would do that every day. It's just variance. I firmly believe it's just variance.
I just wanted you to say it because everyone has thought that, especially when you play shitty and you're like, I got to bounce back. Got to have a good one. Got to go low the next day. And
the opposite of that.
Yeah.
The opposite of that is when people like announcers say, why is it so hard to back a great round with a great round? Because it's by definition a 0.05 times 0.05. It's not a big number. Like if you had a 1 in 20 round, 62, 10 under. Why can't you go low the next day? Because you just don't do it very often. So
right.
It's like, okay, pull an ace out of the deck. I'm going to give you 4 chances, 4 cards. Holy shit, you did it. All right, now pull a king. Well, I just pulled an ace. Yeah, no, now I want you to do it again.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't happen often. And sure, we're obviously playing well when we shoot a 62 or whatever it is, your personal upper bound of 10 percentile rounds. So kind of by definition, we're probably playing better. So maybe instead of it being a 10% round the next day, it's a 15% round. Mm-hmm. But like, it's still a different day. You may have slept differently. You had Whataburger taquitos instead of a McDonald's bacon, egg, and cheese. Like, who knows what happened? Process goals are the only thing, in my opinion, that matter.
I'm just going to leave that right there because that is absolutely perfect. And I just hope people can resonate with that because it's hard. Like you said, you want it so much. Oh. I have a tournament coming up this weekend. It's a 4-day. It's our first major. And I'm going to be honest, I want it right now. And I'm like, I needed to talk to you today to just be like, hey, process goals. That's
awesome. I mean, that's like with Frederick and Hannah. She struggled at Q school. At LPJQ school, and we put on a conversation like this for about an hour. It was all about meditation and process and focus and everything. And then she went out for Epson or whatever the next Q school was and crushed it.
Yeah.
And they both said, they're like, dude, it was that talk. Like, I get it. You want to play well. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. I mean,
it's just so hard because, like you said, it's just so hard.
Well, so David Epstein is a great author. He saw me speak at Wharton a couple of years ago, and he really liked, because what I was talking about at Wharton's economics decision making conference was embracing uncertainty and like being okay with it. And that's what he was like. That's actually what I'm writing a book about right now. So he came here. And the reason I bring him up is like, I would never come up with something this intelligent to say. Here's a Columbia, New York Times bestselling author. And he's like, the reason that is we all want to take agency over our outcome. So it's like, if Will hit the hole in one, if Will hit a hole in one at the US Open, a cynic would be like, well, it's not where you were aiming. It wasn't that good of a shot.
Yeah.
But it's like, Will wants to be like, that's what I was trying to do. It was not what you were trying to do. That was luck.
Right.
Guess what? 6th place still paid the same. Like, that's the very nature of this game is you don't have agency over the outcome. It's not like tennis where I'm better than you. I'm going to beat you. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just not like that. I mean, I don't know what Usain Bolt's record is in the 100 meters lately. I bet it's pretty high. He's just faster than everyone.
You're right.
Golf, you can be way better than me.
Yeah, I was gonna say it just depends, and that's why I love match play too. You just never know what's gonna happen out there. Shit, the weirdest things happen in match play too. Like statistics, I feel like go out the door in those days.
Completely. I mean, I think I've played in 5 or 6 U.S. mid-ams. I've made match play. I think I've been like top 10 or 20 in the match play qualifying in all of them, except for the one that I hurt myself and withdrew from.
Yeah.
And I've gotten smoked in the first round every single time.
Yeah. You ran in, we talked, you ran in some buzzsaws, didn't you?
Just buzzsaws every single time, where it's just like, holy shit, again? Like, it's been brutal. Like, I've never won a USGA match in my entire life. And I've clearly better than the vast majority of people I've played. I just keep getting killed.
What did you shoot, to get into those? Because I've been like one off from alternate 2 or 3 times, I think now. What do you like? I know it's just kind of different everywhere. I just didn't know if you rememred at all.
Yeah, I don't know. Better than everyone else in the field. I mean, I won. I was medalist by 6 1 year at the locals.
Just cleaned up.
For the US Mid-Am.
Nice.
I shot 66. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I mean, again, I've played well in the match, in the stroke play qualifying each time. I should have been medalist in 2008 Milwaukee, but I quit halfway through the round. I shot 65, I think, in the first round. I've got the scorecard right over there because I shot 29 in the first 9 holes.
Ooh.
Shot 29 playing it blind. I got in as an alternate.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
The day before, I flew to Milwaukee and went out blind and shot 29 on the front 9 to set the USGA 9-hole scoring record.
That's insane.
And then the second round, I hit every single green, and the guy I was playing with was playing super slow, and we were on the clock, and I was getting frustrated. And I reached the point where I'm like, I'm for sure, obviously, in match play. Like, I just want this round over. I was so pissed off. We were on the clock the whole time. I'd literally hit 18 straight greens at Brown Deer, which is where the PGA Tour event used to be when Tiger hit the hole-in-one in his first start ever on the PGA Tour. Okay. That was the alternate course. Hit 18 greens, shoot 75, obviously 3 putts and a bunch of 2 putts. And when I finished, I was like 1 or 2 shots off medal, which, again, would be pretty cool to have the 36-hole medal in a US Mid-Am. Yeah. I just completely quit like 9 holes into it. Just like, get me through this and into match play.
And then the buzz
so
off.
Yeah.
That
first round was raining and cold. It was like
you shot 29 and raining and cold.
No. That was in now we're in the match play. The first match was raining and cold. I literally went to, when the forecast came out, I went to like Golf Galaxy or something around there to buy like a slicker for my bag, more clothes, because I literally got in last second. I didn't pack remotely appropriately for the weather.
Right.
And I wind up playing the guy who used to be the first alternate there and is now a reinstated, the first assistant at Milwaukee Country Club. I play him in the first round, and now he lives in San Diego as like a real estate guy. But he had come back, and so all the members are bringing him fresh, warm towels every 2 holes, and I'm out there under this umbrella just freezing and miserable. And I'm like, I think I lost like 2 and 1. I'm like, that was the slowest death ever.
Oh, man. Yeah, rain sucks, dude, man. It just makes the round so much longer. Oh,
rain does suck.
I have about 25 more notes, so I'm going to have to bring you back for part 3. But I got to ask about, because we talked about practice. We didn't even get into like course management at all. But one of the things I've learned from you is just the importance of driver and speed. And I was giving you a compliment when I saw you again in January. You're huge, man. What are you doing for fitness? Because you're 50 and you're defying odds and you're hitting it. Your numbers when you post them on Instagram are crazy long. Like, I think I got to 116 this week and I am like absolutely thrilled. What are you doing for fitness stuff? Because you're killing it. I mean, like 2 years ago, I'll show you your side-by-side video. Like, you're yoked, man. Like, what are you doing over there?
This is more about, I've had a really stressful couple of years in my life. My 14-year-old isn't making the best decisions. My ex-wife is allowing her to not make the best decisions. And I have found out the only way I can control my blood pressure is by going to the gym for about 2 hours a day. So it's been I'm not doing any. It's funny because actually today was the first day I went in there and I was listening to a podcast and I've gotten big. Like, again, I'm 6'1", 225. Like,
So you finally can see it? I think you had body dysmorphia there for a while because I'm like, Scott, you're the biggest guy at the PGA show.
I really don't. Like, I don't feel like I look big, but at the PGA show, I had enough people like, holy shit, man. I definitely have just been working out, just doing those typical 50-year-old workouts that linebackers did back in 1991, just pure, I don't even want to say vanity, but just pure pick up heavy stuff and set it down.
Yeah.
And today was kind of like, I went and hit balls this morning. I've only played twice since November. Today's the first time I actually just went to a driving range and hit balls since November. And I hit it pretty good. And I do love competing. And I do love the idea of trying to be competitive in the U.S. Senior Open or some other stuff. And today was the first time that I was like, maybe I need to lay off all the weights and get into some yoga and get into more mobility, get back into some speed training. So I'm at this inflection point of probably getting a little bit smaller and trying to focus on.
Are you seeing a negative effect on your swing?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my swing is so short, it's ridiculous now.
Yeah, but who cares if it's short? It looks like you're super consistent with it.
Yeah, no, there's a few things I need to clean up in my golf swing, but it's like Keith Mitchell's a guy that I've worked with, for a few years. And a couple of years ago, he's like, I really want to get in the top 10 in the world. He's like, what do I need to work on? I'm like, well, that answer is obviously your irons, but I'd be careful because if you start changing your swing much to hit your irons better, it's probably going to screw up your driver, and your driver's your meal ticket. I'm the same way. Like, my driver is my meal ticket. And so as long as I don't suck with my irons, it should be okay-ish. But it's just a really tough spot where I do need to work on a few things because I've gotten so short. I have no forward shaft lean because now I've had surgery on both my elbows. I've got 4 things in my left shoulder: rotator cuff, slap tear, biceps tendon, and labrum that are torn. I was supposed to have surgery on those on January 25th, right after the PGA show, but I just realized I don't have the bandwidth right now in my life to actually do that. So I've got some stuff I kind of need to Band-Aid and mask along. I just need to play more golf, though.
Yeah. I was going to say, clearly it's working. So I guess working out, and then you've done speed training a while. How'd you get hooked up with Ripstick? Because I know you drew a crowd at the booth every day.
Yeah. It's funny because the stack and speed sticks, and they're all great. I really like the Rip sticks because it's the length of a driver. That was my one issue I had with the stack. It's 41 inches. So for me, it just never felt quite right. And the Rip stick it's just a brilliant design. It's engineered so well. And so I really like it. And then the protocol is just swing it fast, man. I think that they've pretty well shown that the left-handed swings aren't as necessary as the right-handed swings. Mm-hmm. So just swing something the correct way for you and swing it as fast as you can. Again, I like the Rip sticks because it's got a brilliant design where you just hold on.
We had. I was going to say, you don't have to worry about it. I know.
No. I think it's such a brilliant design.
Luke sent me one, man. I love it. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's just got this thing that turns, and then the cylinders come out, so you can, make it 4 different weights from this one club. And then the fact that it's the length and it's counterbalanced, which really helps on your joints. I just think everything about it. And I'm going to throw that over there with my first golf club and my broken shaft.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't break that thing. Were you using that a lot then? Or have you just kind of always had a lot of speed?
I've always had a lot of speed. So when I was playing the mini tours back in the late 90s, I hit it past everyone. And I fell victim to the thing that drives me crazy now. When I first was playing that same Cobra driver I was talking about with Tiger, that 43-inch Cobra steel shafted driver, when the Great Big Bertha first came out, I was like, I already hit it past everyone. I don't need this thing. And it felt unsolid. I wish I would have taken it out on the course to realize, man, when I catch it, it goes 20 yards further. When I miss it, because I was just like, oh, I'm mishitting it too much. I'm mishitting it. Well, yeah, but that miss hit with an extra 3 or 4 miles an hour of clubhead speed because of the longer shaft is still going as far as my pure ones. I just on a range was like, I don't like it. As opposed to actually taking it out on the course. Again, because one of the biggest things that drives me crazy that long hitters say all the time is I already hit it past everyone. I don't need more length. No, more is better. Like DeChambeau, he had his big ball back in 2015 and he had his fairway finder. And we were playing a practice round with Zalatoris and Maverick at the Pat Costam at Eugene Country Club. And it was on the 5th hole. And I literally said, I was like, okay, Bryson, I've seen the fairway finder. Show me the big ball. And he all of a sudden just literally hits it 30 yards further. And I'm like, what are we doing? And he's like, Well, I mean, I would love to go back to that DeChambeau from 9 years ago and show him what he's done. Because literally, I was like, you can't leave that in the bag. And he's like, well, I just feel like I'll hurt myself eventually if I'm doing that. And I'm like, this kid is going to finish second in the world long drive contest in under 10 years. And he's worried about just swinging a little harder. I mean, again, like that was when I was like, well, you need to get over that, buddy. I mean, again, it's funny to look back at that was 2015. And it took another 3 or 4 years of convincing for him to say like, okay, let's do this. And actually, it's funny because some of it's great, some of it's bad. I literally saw on Instagram today him saying that he was shaving his legs for better aerodynamics.
I saw that too.
Well, you're not a swimmer, dude. Like a swimmer, we're trying to knock off hundredths of a second.
I honestly thought it was a meme at first, but then I saw the thing and I was like, oh, nope, that's real. That's real.
I wish I would have thought it was a meme because then I would have maybe not commented. I was like, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah. So, okay. So hit it long, ripstick, workout. Before getting into the last question. Put it well. I was going to say, there's. I'm telling you, man. I tried to prepare for this, but I knew we were going to go all over the place because there's just so much greatness in the decade that I've learned, man. I try and share it as much as I can, tell everyone to get it. So, what is like the best place? Like, how should I'd say the average golfer that's following from again just surveying, probably about 12 to 13 handicap. Biggest goals to become single digits, avoiding blow up holes. Those are kind of the common goals. How should they get started with Decade?
At this point, you just go to decade.golf. You used to be able to just Google Decade Golf, go to decade.golf. You'll see everything you need to see. Super simple product. Again, we've got free yardage books in there to where I feel like the app really does pay for itself if you're a tournament golfer. Again, I hate saying that it's a great product because it's my product, but I really have tried hard to make it a great product, and I really believe in it.
Yeah, man, it absolutely is. If you type in Decade Golf Review, my blog post comes up #1, and it's just me raving about it too. So it's not just you selling the thing. But
well, I certainly appreciate that.
Yeah, man, seriously though, it's so helpful. Guys, if you haven't downloaded it yet, absolutely do it. Just for the putting, for learning how to hit your irons. We didn't even get it into like strategy and stuff with that. We had a little bit in the first interview, but like I said, it's my North Star during the round. Like if I didn't have that, if I don't have a pin sheet now, it's actually kind of hard because I'm like, oh man, where should I be aiming at? So I've definitely got dependent on it, and it's helped my game a ton. So I guess for the last question, I'm just curious. You've shared a little bit. You've worked with so many great players, just super high caliber on the biggest tours out there. What are some maybe other things that we don't really know about pros, or maybe how they practice or what they're thinking during the round that maybe would surprise the casual viewer, and maybe that could help them too?
That they're all really insecure. I mean, they can throw up a good front and they are all just as scared as everyone at home. They've just got a way of dealing with it themselves, whether that's an explicit meditation practice or an explicit process. The best players in the world are really good at doing the same thing every single day.
Interesting. Yeah, you just think that, man, those guys got it all together, but everybody's fighting the same battle, sounds like.
They're all fighting the same battles, man.
That's crazy.
The game is elusive. It comes and goes.
That I think it'd be hard. I think it's so scary to be a pro too. I mean, I went to Q school in 2020, and that's when I was playing with pros, and I was like, oh wow, I never want to make this. I'm gonna just work in the biz, doing my own business and stuff, because I never want this to be my livelihood. Because I saw guys that
too much.
They didn't even they weren't having fun.